I knew nothing. I had 7 days and I was about to take a final that would decide my grade. And I made it out okay. This is how it happened. So it all started in the spring of 2018 during the course enrollment period for the next semester, the fall of 2018. I had lined up most of my classes, but I wanted to take an extra one so I could fill out one of the requirements for the engineering school. So I'm looking by all the classes and I happened to scroll by a class called Digital Logic Design. I knew the class existed, but I didn't know much about it. The class description said Boolean algebra, combinational network sequences, sequential networks, logic functions. All of that meant squat to me. So I had to ask a couple of my upperclassmen friends about the class, and the general response was actually really positive. They said the teacher was great, the class was fun, they learned a lot, and the GPA was pretty low. So all of that added up to a pretty great class to take. But there was one warning sign with this class. The only time that it was offered was a 9 a.m. section every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Now, if there was one thing that all college students hate, it's the 9 a.m. class. The dreaded wake up in the morning before everybody else and having to go to class and learn a bunch of stuff when you're dead tired. But I decided to enroll in it anyways. So fast forward to the first day of the 2019 fall semester. I'm sitting there in my class at 9 a.m. tired out of my mind, and the teacher's going over the syllabus. However, when she's going over how the course is graded, she says something that catches everybody's attention. You can Dutch knock out the final for this class. For those of you who don't know what a Dutch knockout is, a Dutch knockout is essentially allowing the student to take the final for the class and having that final score be that grade for the student in the class. Now that was a big deal. The purpose of that was that if you knew the class material already, you wouldn't have to, study for the things in the middle. You could just prove everything you know at the end and that would be okay. But for most people during that time, I still planned to study for my midterms. I planned on working hard to get a good grade in that class. So the fact that the Dutch knockout existed, it wasn't a big deal to me. But it was. So the second class comes around and I'm sitting there, tired out of my mind again, and the teacher's going over the first subject, converting binary to hexadecimal. I'm sitting there thinking, I know this. This is awesome. I don't need to pay attention for this class. And I look over the course syllabus and it turns out I actually know a couple of things for the next couple of classes. So I'm thinking in my head, free pass. I get to skip a couple of 9 a.m.s, and then when the teacher starts teaching stuff that I don't know, I'll just go to class that day and all will be good in the world. So a couple of classes go around and a lot of good night's sleep for me, and finally that class comes where the professor's teaching something I don't know. Logic gate minimization. This is a class that I have to go to, so wake up real early, ready to learn, pencil ready, notebook ready, ears open, and the professor starts teaching. And then it suddenly hits me. I have no idea what she's talking about. The professor's going over multiplexers, encoders, decoders. I'm just sitting there trying to process this alien language. My notebook's completely empty and I have no idea what's going on. So I immediately go into damage control. I start to plan the next day where I can cram all the information that I don't know to better prepare myself for the next class. But then that thought gets into my head. That one thought that would begin the suffering that I would endure towards the end of the year. What's the point of going to class if you can't learn or understand the professor? And to add on to that effect, the snowball effect was definitely present when skipping classes. After you had skipped a bunch of classes already, it's definitely much harder or close to impossible to go to that class again. And then suddenly I get that email. The midterms are coming. When that email came, I realized I really know nothing about this test. So I decided to make a plan. I plan to cram for the next couple of days and hopefully prepare as much as possible for this test that I was absolutely not ready for. The day of the test comes and I'm sitting there and I walk into the classroom ready to take this test, and I'm actually pretty confident about this test. A little overconfident. The teacher passes around the test, we sit down, she says begin, and I open the test. And there's the first problem. I read it, I have no idea what's going on, and I'm thinking, okay, this is a hard problem. I'll skip it, go on to the next one, and come back to it after I'm done with all the other problems. I do this 7 times, and guess how many questions there were on this test? 7 questions. I had done that for every single problem on that test. I had literally no idea how to solve any of these questions, and for the first time in my life, I got an F on a test. But not just any F, a big old fat 0. From that moment on, my only hope of getting a good grade in that class was the Dutch knockout. But even with that in mind, days passed, weeks passed, months passed, until I had that one morning that everyone has, that morning when you wake up and you look at the date and you realized how screwed you are, and a wave of stress just comes flowing through your body. When that time had reached me, I had 7 days. 7 days until I took that final exam I knew nothing about and that counted for all of my grade. So I picked it up immediately. I had to use all the resources I had in order to get, slightly prepared for that test that I was about to take. And that first resource was teacher assistants, or TAs. But here's the thing, I couldn't just go to a TA and ask them a question from week 2 and expect them to not look at me like I'm crazy or that I'm, dumb. I think for the questions that I had in mind, it was the equivalent of an Algebra 1 student asking their teacher how to do addition. And that's just something that I couldn't do. So I holed myself up in my room for 3 days, studying, sleepless nights, everything, you name it, caffeine, everything. Until I finally can ask some reasonable questions to my TAs. So I was able to go up to my TAs, ask a lot of these questions, clarify a lot of things, and it really helped me in that entire process of trying to learn the entire subject. If you guys ever have TAs, I really suggest using them as a resource because their job is literally to make sure that you know everything that you should know. And that's something that definitely saved me during this entire process. But there were only so many TA sessions, and I had to find another group of people that I could, study with. And fortunately for me, I had a couple of friends in that class, so we were able to get together for the next couple of days and go through almost every single practice problem that the professor gave us and in the textbook. Over the next 7 days, I averaged about 3 hours of sleep, studied my mind out, and asked about every single possible question to my TAs and my professor. The day had come. I was finally about to take that test. So I walk into that lecture hall, nervous as I could be, just like that first test. And the professor hands out the test and says begin. So I begin. So the next 4 hours go by like that. And then suddenly I'm in a car on the way home thinking about how that test went. But the story doesn't end there. 10 days later, I'm checking my grade report and I see a big fat F next to the class, Digital Logic Design. I'm thinking the worst has happened. I actually failed this class. I'm gonna drop out, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur, or maybe a freelancer, but my life in college was over. But in my head, I'm thinking, I didn't do so badly on that test. So I email my professor, "Dear Professor blank, hi, I was checking my grade report and saw that my grade and was wondering what score I received on the final." And then she replies, "Oh, I accidentally made a mistake on your grade report. The grade you received on the final was a 91, and that is your grade for the class." I had done it. I managed to not fail out of this class that I really deserved to fail. And, it turned out to be quite the learning experience. It's okay to skip class.